Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Cook County Public Health and Human Services Board to order on this Tuesday, October 17th at 8:30 a.m. First thing I'd like to point out is we actually don't have our financial report attached to the consent agenda. So we'll just want to pull that, and it is complete, but both will be done or attached to next month's agenda. So given that amendment, is there anything else someone would like to pull from the consent agenda? Else I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we accept the consent agenda with the elimination of item C.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Motion and support. Any further discussion? Hearing or saying none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And that moves us down to our staff report. We have Grace Bushard here this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. So I am here today for my final presentation. I'm going to, a couple months ago, Commissioner White asked a question about how does a child end up in out-of-home placement, and so this is a presentation in response to that question. And so I'm going to, there's many components to it. I'm going to do a little overview of the history of how children ended up in out-of-home placement throughout time, and then the process of placement, and then the continued need for foster care for children. So here I go. So there is a long and complicated history of foster care and out-of-home placement. Throughout time, kids have needed places to go when their parents died, when they were left alone. There are major weather incidences, things like that left people homeless, and children were taken in by family or strangers if they could. But there's also concern. There are also developments of orphanages, which were just mass housing for kids, which really didn't meet their physical and mental and emotional needs. And those went out of vogue probably in the early 1900s when Jane Addams, who's well admired by all people in social work for creating the settlement house movement, developed a process for really looking at providing people with social and medical needs so that they could care for their own children. One of her most fundamental pieces of work that really engaged families was a playground in Chicago, and so families came there, and it was massively popular that children could play. And through her work, and I think there was a real social movement that was created around that really led to a shift in how children were seen and what their needs are. And she did win a Nobel Peace Prize, and the second woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. And so we just really honor her from a social work perspective too. But it is typical for other family members to care for kids too. I don't know, one day I woke up and my cousin was there. He was at our house for the summer. My aunt and uncle needed a break. And so, I think that that's really common for families to help out families. There's also the history of forced removals in our country, and through the removal of children from their tribes, as the policies of Western movement and were passed in the federal government, Indian families were forced off their land. Many people died. Many people were left to live on land where they couldn't survive, and many children suffered. And one of the responses to that was boarding schools. Another element of that was just the idea that Indian people could not live together with Western people, and so boarding schools was a way to shift the way people were seen, the children were seen. And so many thousands were forcibly removed. Hundreds of thousands of children were removed. And I think this picture is probably such a dramatic picture. This is the Carlisle School in Pennsylvania, is from 1900. There has to be 1,000 children here, and all removed forcibly from their families. So many, many hundreds of thousands of children were removed in that manner. So I guess when I talk about the complicated history of removal, there is a legacy that is that experienced by many people that is not one of caring and nurturing, but one of force and control. And I think elements of that feeling and belief still live in our community today. And I understand that. I understand. So.
Yeah, that one of the things that we learn about is intergenerational trauma, and so that
Yes.
that traumatic history still
Yeah.
it is felt by as the further generations,
And I
the
think-
huge impacts.
Definitely. And I think if we tuck it under the rug and don't talk about it, it festers and grows. And so one of the things, diverging a little bit, I went to an Indian mental health conference a few years ago, and the big takeaway I from that conference for me was that I'm just going to lay it on the line. When I meet with Indian families, I always say, I know this must feel really awful. The history of me working as social worker, working with you, the history has been really oppressive, and I apologize for that. That's not what I'm here about, but I just really want to recognize that. And I think that it really helps to name that and hopefully reduce some of the fear, but it's an anxiety that we get from every family that we ever visit. That for the most modest support is, are you going to take my kids away? And that is how people perceive our work. So fast forwarding to the mid-19th century, there's a lot of laws that were enacted by the federal government to prevent child abuse, and states also enacted laws. The major legislation was the 1974 Child Abuse Prevention Treatment Act, and shortly after the Indian Child Welfare Act, and that was again to assure that children remained with their families, and ICWA is good for all families because it really values families, not just for Indian people, for all families. I learned so much from that process of looking at building kinship networks and working with natural resource supports. And so it's a really wonderful law for all families for all families that we work with. In 1997, the Adoption and Safe Family Act really put time limits on how long a child could remain in out-of-home placement. And so, and then most recently, the Families First Prevention Services Act, I forgot a word there, I apologize for that, provides financial incentives to agencies that work to provide preventive services versus out-of-home placement. But as you can see, the federal government has a significant influence on the work that we do, even in Cook County. They line up, they pass the laws that the state has to enforce and that the courts need to enforce. So we have a lot of structure around these out-of-home placements that we have to follow. But today, out-of-home placement and child removal is still sometimes necessary for a variety of reasons. And so how does a child go into out-of-home placement? It can happen quickly, or it can happen through the course of our work with a family. So the way it happens quickly is perhaps law enforcement responds to a call at a home and they find that it's unsafe conditions, and that are not due to poverty, and it's not safe for the children to be there, and they'll say, we have to remove the children. There could be violence towards the children, a report of maltreatment. Sometimes we get reports, and again, the guidelines are all provided to us through the state statute that indicate what the criteria are for child removal. And so if we get a report of violence, we work with law enforcement, and the child may be removed in those situations. So many times we have no idea who these children are, and we're surprised, like, oh, I've never met this family before. And so, okay, now we're meeting them, we're learning about their needs. Children are born sometimes with substances in their system, and that doesn't always lead to a placement of a child, but it can at times if parents aren't able to create a safe environment, or if there isn't a safe person that the child can go with and where mom can be. if both parents are arrested, sometimes that happens in a DUI, or driving under the influence of a car is pulled over, and there's kids in the car, and the parents are intoxicated. They might temporarily be placed in care until parents are doing better, or we can find relatives for that child, or a death of a caregiver when there's no other caregiver. Generally, people have friends and families where the child can go, but that can be a reason too for a sudden out-of-home placement. Out-of-home placement can also happen after a long period of working with a family. Many of the reports, the vast majority of reports we get are related to neglect, and neglect related to substance use disorders. And we're, as you know, we are at the end of the road here, and there's no inpatient treatment services here, and outpatient treatments may not meet the needs of the individual. And so, it's a huge ask to say to someone, now you have to leave your kids and family for a month to go to treatment. I think it's a huge anxiety, and so people put it off, and and I'm not criticizing that at all. It's a very big decision. Yet, if their health declines, if their using increases, and the child is no longer safe, we may need to place the child, and that, and so I think substance use disorder. I wonder if I say the same thing twice here. It struggles with substance use disorder, and then parents are unable to resolve safety concerns. So that could start with a report, a maltreatment report. We have a case plan, and we just can't get it together for whatever reason. Does that all make sense? Just feel free to ask questions or make comments throughout the presentation. That's all.
Well, and maybe you'll cover this down the road, but the training that I've had, and my understanding from you too, is just that we do everything we can to try to keep kids with their families. That's like number one priority. Safety of the kids is number one priority. But if it does come down to it, there are lines where, okay, this isn't working. We've tried. We're doing all we can. And for the safety of the child, we do need to try something else.
Absolutely.
I know of, I guess I'm just thinking of one family that was struggling with substance use, and both parents were, and I guess I don't know the details of how that was discovered or worked through, but what ended up happening is one of the parents went to treatment, out of home treatment, and even though that other parent was still at risk for use and abuse, and the children stayed there while the one parent went to treatment, and then kind of switched around and had the other parent in it. It did have success, maybe not long-term success, but the children were able to grow and develop, I'd say successfully. So I just appreciate how difficult that situation is and can be, and how great the impacts can be for the whole family and the kids and for our whole community having to work through that.
Yes, that's a really great perspective. Thanks for sharing that, and I agree that we try to be as creative as possible. That's one of the beauties of living at the end of the road, is that there aren't a lot of resources, so you get to be really, really creative and really tap into who is in your family and in your life who can help, and who can, and we ask people, tell me about when things are really, really going well in your family. Who was there? What was going on? What was happening? How can we recreate that? How can we bring that in? So to be more focused on solutions versus focused on removal. We have, and this is again my thanks to the board and to all the support from Allison, have had the opportunity to have more staff so that we can do this hard work of being with families, finding their resources. If you had 50 families as a caseworker, that's what you would do. You would say, this one's out, this one's there, this one's there. You wouldn't have time to get to know people personally and intimately to help them resolve their own problems, which has a more lasting effect. Child placement can be quick or slow, and then there's always judicial system involvement in any placement. So in an emergency protective care, those scenarios that I said where things could happen suddenly, law enforcement might go into a scenario and they'd say, we're removing this child. And then they call us up and they say, place we need a place for this child to go. So the process is law enforcement has the authority to remove a child. Our agency has the responsibility and authority to place the child. So we don't have that authority. We can, if we work with a family over a long period of time and things just aren't getting better and the kids are suffering and struggling and we need to request that the children be removed, we file what's called a CHIPS petition, Children in Need of Protection and Services. And that is done in working with the county attorney. We cannot just say you're filing. We can't tell the county attorney that we're filing a CHIPS. She knows the law. We have to follow the rules. We need to make sure that we have done everything that we can to prevent out-of-home placement. We want the least restrictive option for families, and we want to go to court with clear and convincing information that says these children really need to be placed into care. I just want to say a CHIPS petition doesn't always remove children. Sometimes we can order services, and we can have court-ordered services. Like, for example, if a family maybe it's a medical neglect. Parents are struggling getting their child to a medically required appointment for a long period of time. It can be documented. We worked with the family. We have the support that says this hasn't happened. We can file a CHIPS petition, and the judge orders services, and sometimes that level of ordering is really helpful. We don't like to go there. It's not pleasant, but we are advocates for children who need a voice, and that's what they need, and so that's why we make these difficult decisions. But again, the court system is always involved at multiple points in the process. In an emergency protective care situation, if law enforcement were to remove a child, we're required to have a hearing within 72 hours, and then the judge can decide whether or not the child will remain in out-of-home placement, or if we don't even have to go to court if the issues can be resolved. An example of that is maybe parents are driving while intoxicated with children in car. Maybe they're arrested, maybe they go to detox, and children are in care 48 hours later. Okay, we're better. Okay, we're going to drive home now. You know, they're safe then, and they're reunited with the family. And then, oftentimes these are situations where families are from out of town. This is what in my experience here. Visitors or travelers coming through. That's when we've had those experiences. And so, yes.
And so, when you say they're placed, with whom? Foster care parents? Like, say we have intoxicated drivers. Kids are sleeping in the back seat, and now we're going to take those children for a little bit. Where do we take them?
To a licensed foster care provider, if possible. Sometimes, and we don't have many, but we do have, a licensed foster care provider is the person that we would contact, and we would say, hey, we've got a couple kiddos here that need care. And then we do work with the parents too and say, hey, do you have family around, and who can pick up these kids, and who do you want to take care of your children? People make mistakes. They have struggles, and so we want to maintain that dignity by saying, letting them make choices about their children, even in those most difficult situations. And those are very difficult conversations to have. Your children are being removed. You cannot have your children. Where would you like them to go? Who would you like to care for them? We can make those arrangements, and that's our goal always, is to get the kids in a spot where everybody feels comfortable, versus stranger care. We don't like to do that, but sometimes that's our option, and that's what we have to do because things are moving so fast. And sometimes foster care could be brief, too, until we find that relative or family member. So, okay. Throughout if there's a CHIPS petition filed, there's regular hearings that are court-ordered. There's a schedule of hearings. Both parents have attorneys. And it gets to be complicated. But then there's a case plan, and things are ordered, and then hopefully things resolve. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't, and then the timeline on out-of-home placement until permanency, what we call permanency, for a child to have a permanent home, is 1 year. Sometimes we expand those timelines. It's all up to the judge. And now without Judge Kuzo, we don't know how that will go in court. Each judge will have their own way of doing it, but within a year, things need to be, a child can't be in out-of-home placement more than a year without having a permanency plan. And so sometimes those children are placed, or custody is removed from parents. It's the exception, but could be an ultimate outcome. And I think that's what people worry about. Some placements are voluntary. Sometimes parents say, I have something going on, and they've been working with us, and they need a place for their child to go, and they don't have any family, or they don't have anybody that they want their child to go to, and they say, and so we agree to a voluntary placement. Sometimes respite care is provided to families when things are tense and we need to work things out. It's a really great model, like get a respite for a weekend, give everybody a break from each other, calm things down, reset, get a plan, move forward. That's life. In Minneapolis, many years ago, the first kind of organization like this that I became aware of was called the Crisis Nursery, and that's exactly what it was. It's a place for parents to say, I'm really stressed, I'm really worn out, I need a break, no questions asked. Of course, you take your break, and then the child is safe, the parent is safe, and then that's a healthy way to go. In our world, we're so mobile, and people move around so much. It's we maybe don't have friends or relatives who are close by who can care for our kids in that time of stress. And when a child does place, or when a parent does place a child, if it's a respite care situation, that's a lot lower level of authority. But if it's for a longer period of time, people sign what's called the voluntary placement agreement, and that again is reviewed by the court. It's a different kind of court order. It's voluntary. So the review happens at 168 days, at no longer than 6 months. We don't want to no child should be left in foster care for an extended period of time without a review. So then we have court reviews on a regular basis. But our goal is always to reunite the children and family. That's always a temporary out-of-home placement, if it occurs, is always temporary, unless it's insurmountable situations that can't reunite the family and children. Placing children is always something we want to avoid. It's very traumatic for the children and parents. I know that we've talked about the adverse childhood experiences, and there's a set of 10 things that could happen to a family or to a person when they're growing up that contributes to long-term struggles, and that list of 10 was developed in a more urban white community. In Detroit, they organized the ACEs, and one of the ACEs that they included was out-of-home placement. It is an adverse childhood experience. It is so traumatic to be removed from your family. Kids, you know how kids' brains are. If something happens, it must be my fault. I must have done it, and they carry that with them. And so even though we think and it may be the best thing that we can do it at the time, sometimes we talk about the best worst solution. Kids can carry that burden with them, and it's not helpful. So we try to avoid that. Out-of-home placement can become complicated and hostile with attorneys and court, and you're really diverting so many of your resources and energy that you could use in helping the family resolve the problem to court reports, doing all the mechanics of the work. And the next slide shows all the people that are involved in when we have an out-of-home placement. The social worker, of course, has a lot of work to do. County attorneys and the court have a lot to do. Economic assistance, we have to make sure that children have medical assistance. It's what's called 4E. It's a program that assures that all children in foster care have medical assistance, and also it's a funding stream that covers some of the cost of out-of-home placement, that this is part of the federal government, and there's all sorts of requirements and paperwork and filing that we have to do with that. There's licensing wherever the child goes, even if they go with a relative. Relatives need to be licensed the same as any private person who wants to be a foster care provider. The social works plus the court work on the transfer, on the reunification plan or transfer of custody. Sometimes if we don't find a placement for the child, and I get these messages from my co-supervisors throughout the region, help, I have no place for this child to go. Does anybody have any idea where this child could go? And the amount of time and anxiety it causes to not have a place for a child is immense. But the courts and social workers work together on the unification plan, the transfer of custody. It's and you can imagine it's the county attorney, it's Dee Dee, it's Kathy Ann, it's the whole team. It's a lot of work and a lot of time. And then fiscal, there's revenue. We have to make sure that if a child is receiving Social Security, we redirect that money to our funds. We need to do a parental fee. So we meet monthly to review all the children that are in care to make sure that we've checked all the boxes. Who have you done this? Have who have we done everything that we've needed to do? And it's a long process and it takes a lot of work. And so not only is it bad for children and families, it's immensely work dense for the social workers and the team. And again, all this energy is going into making sure these pieces go together when we could maybe be working with the family. And so that's how we like to really work
Grace?
with them. Yes, sir.
Commissioner White has.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Where do guardian ad litems come in?
Oh, good question. Great question. In the court, once a child in need of protection and services petition is filed, and the parents admit that they need services, then a guardian ad litem is assigned, and that guardian ad litem provides oversight to the court. They're like an attorney for the child. Once a child reaches 14 years old, they are allowed to have an attorney of their own in addition to the guardian ad litem, but that's when that guardian ad litem comes in, and they're very, very influential and very powerful and very important partners for us to determine what's in the best interest of the child. And they can make recommendations that are different than maybe what the social work staff are making or what the attorneys are making. And in my experience in Judge Kuzo's court, he really listened to the guardian ad litems, and their input was really valuable. There's guardian ad litems that are through the state of Minnesota, and then ICWA, there's ICWA guardian ad litems as well. And so we like to stay in touch and keep them posted on changes and needs of the families as well. So they are assigned through the court once there is an admission of that the children are in need of protection and services.
And do we have any that actually reside here in Cook County?
Not at this time. They're assigned through St. Louis County, and so I believe there's a shortage of people who are in the role of guardian ad litem, but we fortunately don't have a lot of children out of home placement, so we're thankful that we don't have a lot of work in that area. But we've been really, really pleased with the guardian ad litems that have been assigned through the courts. They provide reports to the court just like social workers do, and they also appear at all court hearings, and they also weigh in on recommendations and that are ordered by the court. So they have a lot of authority and power, and we're really grateful for their presence for our children.
I was just going to note that with this current slide, talking about coordination and all the different positions within our organization that need to work together to to work with this system, employee turnover would have a very significant impact on any one of these aspects, and that coordination can really add an added challenge, and lack of experience or someone coming into a position new can really be challenging to make everything work. So just want to recognize that difficulty with all of this.
That is a very, very, very good recognition, because it's very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and it just takes a long time to learn this. And because each of these worlds are very, very different. Economic assistance and fiscal and social work and the attorney's office all have their own realms and authorities that they're working in. And then we have to find that intersection where we're all coming together and we need to work together. And the great thing is we all like each other, so that's really good. So that's really the first place to start. So we can work together. But I've been, and then we also have great supports from the state. We're never alone, and we do rely on state staff to help us and train us in this whole, what we call 4E process, which is a whole nother world. I can't even describe it because it's so complex, and it's based on AFDC. The funding stream is based on AFDC rules from 1994 or something like that. It's just like, but people know these things at a different level, and they help us and they guide us, and I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, workplace culture, I think, would be a huge part. Just like you said, you all get along, so that's really good. But then each one of these positions also has to know each one of the other positions and how they intersect and work with each other. And yeah, it's very
Yes.
complex.
Yes, we have somebody coming on in the first week of November to do a training for our team from the state. This is something that Allison Plummer put together, and she would represent the economic assistance component of this whole mechanism. And the reason we all have to work, the overall goal of all these systems is to ensure that there's continuity of care and funding. And so, for example, and this is based on federal law, but in the first hearing where a child is removed from the home, there has to be a statement on a court order that says that it is contrary to the welfare and in the best interest of the child to be removed from the home. And that is the exact language that must be on the court order. And if it is not in the court order, we are not able to get 4E funding, so we lose an amount of funding from the federal government. So it's very important that all of us know this so that we can help each other out, and we can say, make sure we get the 4E language, and that's on there. Sometimes the judge remembers it, sometimes they do not. Sometimes court is moving really, really fast, and so you just really have to have it in there. So that's how you have to know each other's jobs so that you can help each other out. And if you don't know your own job, if you're just learning your own job, it's really hard to learn somebody else's job. And so, yes, this out-of-home placement is a complex process internally, and it involves a lot of systems. And it's all about the child, making sure that child there's adequate funding so that child can remain in a safe placement. That is what we're trying to do. And our goal, of course, is always reunification. But we do this all so that a child has health care and they're safe. So, and we try to remember that in all conversations. Friends, families, and relatives, when placements do need to occur, this is a question, we always try to work with the parent to find out what their preferences are for placement. Families, close friends, and relatives who provide care go through the same licensing process as I would if I were providing care. In fact, I was licensed to provide care for one of my relatives at one point in Ramsey County, and so our family was licensed. We met with the social worker, and then we received the same payments that another foster care provider would receive, and so it's so a lot of support is provided to foster parents. Some of the processes is background studies. That can be really hard for a family. They say, my God, I'm their family. Why do I get a background study? And it's because it's just the process, and that's what we have to do. And we agree, it's hard, but we'll we'll help you out and we'll help you move forward. We do a home safety check to make sure there's adequate space for the child, that there's no fire risks, and that there's access to phones. And then one thing we always hope to do is not move a child so that they don't change school districts and lose all their friends and things like that. So that's why perhaps we would choose a local family in foster care versus a family in Duluth, because the amount of that's hard on a child to lose all their, they're not with mom and dad. Could it be my fault? I'm losing all my friends. I have to go to a new school and live with this person that they maybe like, but they don't know. And so that is why local options are still really, really important. We really need that. And also, social workers are required to visit the child in their home, licensed foster care home, once a month on a regular basis. And so wherever that child is placed, that's where we go. And so it could, we're fortunate, again, not to have too many children placed, but you could go to all 4 corners of the state. And if a child is placed out of state, you're also required to see that child out of state on a monthly basis. And that's just part of the interstate compact for the placement of children, which is required for children who are placed across state lines. And that, again, involves a lot of state support. And they are very, very gracious and very, very helpful. So we do really rely on friends, families, and relatives to provide us with support, but it may not be an option sometimes. We have to look, each family is different. We have to really look at each family and what their needs are. And child placement sometimes is necessary to keep families together and safe. When friends, and just as I was saying, sometimes we need to look at those local options when the friends and families are not around. And the need for foster care providers still exists. And I know this is about out-of-home placement, but we can't have out-of-home placement unless we have a place for the kids to go. And so that's why we are looking for people who would be available and open to becoming licensed to care for children. And so that is the other piece that's really, really important. As much as we want to avoid the situation, when the situation arises, we need to have that resource. And right now we have limited resources for families or for children and families. And the other thing is just reframing how we see this, that the foster families aren't adversarial to the parents and the children. They are a support. And we've seen some really beautiful relationships grow between the foster parents and the parents. And once the children are reunited, they continue to have a relationship. And they say, oh, go over to so-and-so's house because and give them a break. And they maintain this relationship over time. And that's what we like to foster is the relationships that that we aren't adversarial. Our goal is to be a support and to help the families. So, and it can be really wonderful. This is a quote from one of our youth who is in foster care, and it's that child is now we're going to be transferring custody of that child to a relative, but that bridge, that point in time is really, really powerful and important. And so I just did want to share with you all too the need for foster care as a component of this whole out-of-home placement process. So thank you all for listening. Oops. Oh, no, yes, it's a challenge. Sorry. Didn't know I had more slides. Now we're at thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Any questions for Grace? Or any further questions? Commissioner White?
What's the process for becoming a foster care parent? Is there training that's required of the
Yes.
potential caregivers? And you explained about the surroundings that they would be living in, checking out the living situations, but what's required of the people?
That's a really great question. So it starts with an application, a background study, a safe assessment of the home, and then there is training. There's training required for car seat training if you're going to have younger children, and then sudden infant death training for if you're going to have younger children. And then there's 12 hours of behavioral health training that's required because of the kids that come into placement are likely have had a lot of distress, and so we'd want to have that. That training is available. We develop a relationship with people and get to know them and get to know what their comforts are, who they want to, what are they most open to. A sibling, are you open to a sibling set? No, I can only have one child at a time. I cannot, and so we just get to know people, but there is training. There's paperwork, and we complete that all internally, and Nancy Deming is our licensor, and she would do all that work, and then we submit it to the state, and then the state gives us a license. The license is valid for 2 years, and there's a very, it's a great honor and a high level of oversight as well. If a person is licensed for foster care and they do have a child in their home, and there is a situation, say a foster provider struggles and they are perpetrated some sort of abuse or violence toward that child, it is over. They can no longer be a foster parent. It's a one and done. Whereas if a parent has some struggles, we work with the parents. But foster parents, there's no opportunity to continue care. And that's why we're required to visit the children in their home without the foster care provider around once a month, because we need to have private conversations to find out how things are going and how are things with this child. So we need to look for the safety of the child. So even though we're in the same agency, we're trying to support the foster family and the child, and we've never had any problems in Cook County, I just want to say. So I'm really grateful for that. So just want to assure you that we've never had that kind of problem, but you do hear about that in other communities, and when you have larger communities, or for families that have lots and lots and lots of kids, because social workers are desperate. They need a place for this child to go. There's no shelters. There's no place for that child to go. So,
Any other questions for Grace?
I just want to say thanks, Grace, for the work you and your team do. It's really hard work. I did child protection for 3 months. That's how long I lasted. But it's hard work. It's a really difficult, and your spirit is really beautiful to listen to, and your heart. So I'm sure that goes down to your team too. So.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. It is hard work, and it's a mindset. You just advocate for the children, and I'm happy to be that person to advocate for children. They need to be lifted up. They have no voice of their own, and they need strong advocates. And I really appreciate all the support that the board has given to our team and to our agency to provide that level of care and support. We have a great team right now, and Rachel's going to be transitioning to that full supervisory role. I'm very happy and excited for her too. So, yeah.
Thank you, Grace. Oh, James, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note, family crises do not happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Yes.
They happen frequently on the weekends, evenings, and when the call goes out, your team has to respond. And I mean, talk about, first of all, the work is just emotionally challenging. There's no way around that. And then it's frequently happening when you're trying to live your life, right? You've got a family event going on and you're called away to deal with these things. So I just really appreciate the level of commitment that it requires for you to do this work. And kudos to you and your whole team for doing it.
Thank you. Yes, we are required to be available 24/7. That's in state law. And so, as I transition to not being available 24/7, that is one thing I just think I will not have to worry about that phone ringing. And and then what am I going to do when that phone rings, and where are those kids going to go, and what is that going to look like? And that it does. That's why we would love to have a few more people available for foster care. So. And yes, it is. It's a lot of dedication, but we are a strong team, and it's a lot of care for each other is what helps lift us up. So thank you for that.
Commissioner White was asking about some of the requirements for the people, and I guess I'd like to know more about the requirements for the home. I'm assuming you need a bedroom for a child, a standalone bedroom, and I'm assuming you need running water. I know there's a lot of housing challenges in our community, and I'm sure that adds to the difficulty with out-of-home placement.
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of ways that it can work.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, fire safety is a really big thing. Depending on your house, you might have to have a fire marshal inspection, grates around the fire. But running water, a lot of people live without running water, but they have access to water. You need access to water, but you don't necessarily have to have running water. And phone service, of course, is really important, for safety. And that can be tricky here in our community as well. I'm sorry, what were your other questions related to the home, the physical home itself? It can be an apartment, it can be a duplex, it can be in a home. I mean, people live a lot of different ways. I think the most important thing is we need a safe adult who can provide care. And again, we just really want to emphasize this is a non-adversarial role. We don't to the parents. We have and the persons who are most successful in this role have a heart for the parents who are struggling and want to provide safety for that child while that parent recovers and help with that reunification. And that is so big. I admire so much foster parents, especially with little babies and such, when they reunify after they've had that long period of time with a little one, and then that it has to be at the heart of it. Otherwise, it can be very challenging. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Allison, you were.
I did. I had a question, Grace, and acknowledging that this could probably be a whole standalone presentation, but wondering if you could say a bit about our coordination with the tribe at the point that a report is received from the point that a child is placed in out-of-home care.
Oh, that's a really good question. And so anytime we work with any child that has any tribal affiliation, we contact Grand Portage Human Services, and there are partners in this. And so, if we in these situations where it's a sudden out-of-home placement, we would be required to inform the tribe, inquire if there's any American Indian heritage, and determine what tribe that those children might be enrolled in, and inform the tribes within 24 hours of receiving it. It's an emergent thing. Anytime a child is placed in out-of-home where it has American Indian heritage affiliation, we need to be very, very clear about following all the rules related to ICWA. And so we would work with Grand Portage if it's a Grand Portage band member. And then we also, we just are so grateful for their partnership, because they guide us on who are family members, where a child can say, what options are available. And we just really work within the cultural, what works for the whole community for safety, and we really trust and rely on the information that we're provided. And so they're really great partners. So there's a lot of rules and laws related to Indian children. So in the court system, the tribe also is a participant in the hearing, along with the parents, along with the guardian ad litem. We still are doing a lot of our, still doing hearings by Zoom, but there can be like 30 squares on that screen, and for all the people that need to be involved in this. And so, that's why I always like to keep that child in the front of my mind, because that's what this is about. And I don't want to get pulled away in political or legal arguments. But we do need, of course, to follow the procedures. But we always have to keep the child at the heart of this. So.
Thank you. All right. Well, it looks like no other questions. I'm sad that this is your last presentation. You've served Cook County so well for so long, children in our community. Thank you very much, Grace.
You're welcome. Yeah, my honor, my pleasure. Thank you. So.
Really appreciate your responsiveness to the question from this board on the out-of-home placement process, and for your great presentation, and again for your years of service. I'm glad we still have a few more months to absorb all of the wisdom and knowledge that you've carried and accumulated over the years. So thank you.
You may want, some of you may not. I hope that answered your question, and please do not hesitate to ask again. This is all, it takes it's a whirlwind of information, very complex, and if it feels complicated, it's because it is, and we're just available to help you out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Well, that moves us down to item 4, our director's report.
Right, well, we'll start as always with an update on our staffing. A few steps forward and a few steps back. As always, in our recruitment efforts, an updated organizational chart was included in the agenda materials. We currently have 4 vacant positions on the team as of this date, with 1 anticipated at the end of the month, following your acceptance of Allison Plummer's resignation this morning, as she's promoted to the HR director position with Cook County. Since our last meeting, Rachel began in her new role as Children and Family Services Supervisor, working alongside Grace over the course of the next few months. Rachel is completing her Foundations Child Welfare Training through the Department of Human Services Child Welfare Training Academy. and is doing a great deal of work onboarding, getting to know the staff and families, and doing some shadowing work with Grace. Also, since our last meeting, Adam Maxwell transferred from his role as Children's Mental Health Case Manager to the Adult Services team, filling that position that Rachel vacated following her promotion. We continue to recruit for an adult mental health social worker and the coordinated crisis response positions on our team. We will be interviewing for the account technician vacancy. We've had a number of candidates to consider for that position following the domino effect of promotions within our fiscal team. We are also posting the economic assistance case aid position following Sarah Schoonover's resignation last month. We did do that initially open to internal applicants. We did not have any interest in that internally, so we'll be opening that up to external applicants. We also have an active internal posting for financial assistance supervisor, again to backfill Allison Plummer's position in anticipation of her promotion to human resources at the end of this month. I want to thank both Sarah and Allison for their years of service to the Public Health and Human Services team and the Economic Assistance unit. Sarah worked for our team for 5.5 years as a case aide, and Allison Plummer made the leap upstairs from the assessor's office back in 2015, and she's been a strong member of our leadership team since 2017. So really glad that Allison has this opportunity to develop and expand her impact across the organization, but she will be deeply missed within our department. We are still preparing to give an update on the work of the economic assistance team at our November meeting. Thankfully, we have 2 experienced staff who will be stepping in to present that caseload and program update information in Allison's absence, as that will be after her transition date. Any questions on the staff updates before I move on? As Chair Mills mentioned, I did neglect to include the monthly financial report as an attachment. It was complete, so I apologize to the fiscal team who worked hard to complete that on time amid their quarterly reporting and all of their other responsibilities while they're short a team member. I can send that via email if anyone's interested in seeing that before the next meeting. Otherwise, my plan will be to include that along with the October financials on the consent agenda for our November meeting. Other department updates to share. The latest version of our community health assessment is complete. We issued a media release last week. The report is now posted on our website, and the 6 priority health areas that our group came up with for the 2023 to 2027 cycle include access to affordable housing, mental health resources and support for well-being, transportation options, affordable healthy foods, and physical health services. Again, the health assessment is posted on the county website, as well as recordings of each of the community meetings that we hosted this summer up at the community center. And again, I included the link to the press release in your agenda materials this morning. We are moving forward with an exciting collaboration with Care Partners of Cook County around supporting aging in our community. This is a part of a larger initiative sponsored by the state of Minnesota, which has opted to become an age-friendly state, and the AARP through their network of age-friendly states and communities. We have launched a local survey and a series of community forums throughout the next couple months to gather community feedback, and we'll plan to share this back to community members and this board beginning in early 2024. Again, included a link to the press release in the agenda materials for our meeting this morning.
It doesn't joke, it is 20 minutes to complete.
It really is.
Yeah, it's thorough.
So I want to thank Julie and the Care Partners team for their partnership on that initiative, Andrea Tofty from our public health team who's leading that work, and we're also getting a great deal of support from the Community Health Board as well. Also from public health, our team is seeing uptick in COVID-19 and general upper respiratory infections in the past several weeks. We are not providing the COVID-19 vaccine in terms of hosting vaccine events, but are partnering with Sawtooth Mountain Clinic to promote their vaccination opportunities, as well as to direct and guide people to access to Paxlovid if deemed appropriate for their treatment. We continue to promote access to at-home COVID tests and general guidance regarding what to do if exposed or tested positive to COVID-19. COVID-19 vaccines became available locally for both adults and children last week on the 11th, with a focus of a series of vaccination events throughout the county, and though that schedule is available on the Sawtooth Mountain Clinic website. SHIP, the Statewide Health Improvement Partnership, is working on the details of a Halloween-themed walk and bike to school day later in October. From emergency preparedness, we are planning a tabletop exercise in collaboration with our local emergency manager, Mike Keyport, and local partners to prepare for the winter storm season. And this is in part a response to those major storms that we saw over the holidays last year. We're working with the Housing Redevelopment Authority to connect past participants in our Healthy Housing Program to additional funding resources aimed at improving the envelope of their buildings, so windows, roof, siding. We're also working with local schools to better integrate prevention programming into their curricula, building rapport and planning with the appropriate staff at each facility across each of the schools in our communities. Continuing to promote the naloxone and Narcan training at Cook County Higher Ed. Again, this is free of charge, available to anyone in the community through the support of some of our opioid settlement funds allocated to Cook County. The next session is next Monday, October 30th. Again, a reminder that our agency is a distribution site, and those harm reduction supplies are available free of charge to anyone. Continuing to promote the mental health first aid trainings throughout November. I also want to give an update on some of our work supporting people through the transition of ownership at Harborview. We work with a number of residents there. I want to thank Jason Hale with the HRA, who's been very communicative in terms of what we can advise tenants to do amid the uncertainty with that ownership change, and providing a more accurate timeline of any changes that could affect the affordability of the units. And I want to thank our staff who have been involved in helping support residents through this stressful time. Finally, I want to mention that last Wednesday, October 11th, Governor Walz recognized that date as County Financial Worker and Case Aid Day in the state of Minnesota. So I want to thank our financial workers and case aides on our team for the excellent work they do every day of the year. And that our Minnesota Family Investment Program Biennial Service Agreement is included under items for board action. This is a required 2-year plan that we submit to the State Department of Human Services to detail some of our policies and outreach practices, the collaborative efforts that we engage in to support families enrolled in that assistance program. We did post this for public comment for 30 days as required. We didn't receive any public comment, but I'm happy to address any questions about that plan before the board takes action to approve that and it's submitted to the state.
Any questions for Allison? Thank you. Moving on to board action. We have 5A, approve the 2024-2025 Minnesota Family Investment Program, or MFIP. Any questions about that? Any motions about that?
I'll make a motion to move forward with that.
Thank you, Commissioner Storlie. I have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
I'll give it to Rana. I saw her hand before. The eyes are faster than the ears. Motion by Commissioner Storlie, support by Rana. Any further discussion? Was that a, no, that wasn't an indication for. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to committee reports. Active Living Steering Committee is our first item. Anything to report there, Commissioner White?
I do, and we had a long conversation towards the end of the meeting about the, is Cook County really a place that welcomes people with disabilities, with mobility issues? Let's really look at this great small town, because if just, excuse me, just because, I mean, some observations of people that were visiting Cook County during Fisherman's Picnic, people that were wheelchair bound, and what they had to go through to get to, like, the food truck. And then if one really looks around entering a building, Holiday, I'm not picking on any particular one, Join, any of our local establishments, there are barriers if you are wheelchair bound. Just because the door is wide enough, or the entry is wide enough, does not mean that it is really welcoming when you can't pull open the door. And the height of bathroom sinks, the height of toilets, grab bars, it's, throughout the county, we have a real lack of amenities, or not even amenities, they're requirements for anybody, and they do not, in my opinion, really say to someone with a disability, we recognize your value, and we are here, we're trying to make this a place that we want you to be. And so that was a really good conversation, but Cook County has often patted itself on the back for how good we are at pick something, anything. But the reality is we are falling short when it comes to people, and that's the aging population, which is significant, and every day, personally, I wake up one day older than the day before, as does everybody else. And so physical abilities wane as one gets older. So I thought that was a really good start for going forward, and that's my report.
Thank you, yeah. I know that's been a significant part of the conversations as we look at some of the infrastructure projects around town, and whether it be the sidewalks or the crossings of streets, or paths, or ramps up to buildings, or whatever, it's a conversation. But yeah, when we think about it, the doors, you know, I could probably count on, I was gonna say one hand, maybe two hands, just the number of buttons you can push for opening doors, you know, there's just
That we
not-
do have.
Correct, right. There's just not that many, right, compared to the number of establishments that we have.
And another point that was brought up, that we have handicapped accessible parking, but along a curb. But if you are the passenger, it's very difficult to get out of a car. I mean, you're on the street, parked in a handicapped thing, but you open your door, the curb, to get out, you're now higher than just ground level, and then to get into your wheelchair. And that is from somebody who's now dealing with that situation. And I never considered, like, well, they're right there, they can just hop out, they're close, they don't, but it makes it even harder to get out because of that. So it needs constant consideration, and not from those of us that are not impaired, but from those of people that actually live with it, because you don't know until you're there.
maybe there's some opportunities with the age-friendly work to try to expand. Or Julie, do you have some?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh.
It's a great lead into what we're doing right now with the Age-Friendly Communities Grant and this initiative to research and really find out. And so we're hoping in the listening sessions, some of these things also come out in the individual communities, like where are the areas? And that's not necessarily, age-friendly is across the ages, but disabilities can be at any age,
Sure.
of course.
Yeah.
And we always say what's good for a mom with strollers is usually also good with a walker or a wheelchair, or, it's something that impacts everybody. But the survey and the listening sessions will be really important, but we also hope to, in the spring, at the other end of this, is do some walkability, studies, and how is it to enter and to do some walk around and visually assess our each neighborhood in our county. So there's lots of opportunities for that. But
Yeah, good.
And I think it might be even better, we're not going to walk around, put everybody in a wheelchair and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or put them in a walker and then tie up one foot or something so they don't have that option to do that. And we used to, my husband, we worked with Wilderness Inquiry out of Minneapolis, and we provided the winter adventure with dog teams out of Camp Minogan. And they brought integrated groups of people with disabilities and able-bodied. And the term for people that don't have an apparent head or physical ability or disability, it's TABS. We're all temporarily able-bodied, and it's going to go away. Trust them, and it does. So with all that planning in mind, you're not doing it for the people you don't know. Do it selfishly, because it won't be very long before, we ourselves will not be able to or easily open that heavy door and get up those steps and enter something. So
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for bringing that up. Arrowhead AUA, we have our meeting in Virginia tomorrow, so I'll be going to that. Arrowhead Health Alliance, I don't think we've met since our last meeting here. ARC, Commissioner Hawkins.
Just want to let everybody know the ARC board, executive board is meeting in this room on Friday. There is also an opening on the advisory board, which meets every other month. Bill Myers has filled that position for quite a few years, I don't know how many, but now that he is the probation officer, there is an opening. So if I'm still learning how we are accepting applications. I just know the last time that there was an opening on that board, or there was an appointment when Bill Myers got appointed, the county board made the recommendation to ARC. So we don't have it listed on our website, but been talking to Jenna and James about how we make, so if you know anybody, I've been reaching out, encouraging people to think somebody, encouraging them to send a name in so that it can be brought forward. But want to let you know, there is an opening on that board, and it's a position from Cook County. So.
Thank you. Have you, I don't presume you have, but have you happened to attend one of the advisory council?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You've
There,
attended
once,
those?
well, we've had one joint meeting together.
Oh, okay, sure.
During COVID, they weren't meeting. So I've only attended one where we met together.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to our Child Care Solutions Subcommittee, Commissioner Storlie.
Unfortunately, the meeting was canceled, so we'll wait for another round. But I guess, with the child care situation in the county with that one having to close down for a while, I'm hoping that everybody had a chance to make arrangements for their children and move forward with some kinds of creative ideas to help them reformulate and come back. So that's the good thing.
Yeah. Allison, would you have any insight about any of the organizational goings-ons around that? Just trying to support, or, you know, there's lots of ins and outs there.
I do and I don't.
Okay.
I am wearing both my parent and my professional hat here as one of those families that was impacted by the closure at Cooperation Station. Remain hopeful that there will be a solution for reopening the doors. I want to commend the board and the staff for the incredible work that they've done to maintain and reestablish operations for families in the community. Some good news is that we do have a new provider in town. Hunter McLaurin is opening child care in the Congregational Church. And I can also say that the Child Care Solutions Subcommittee and our staff internally who are working on our various child care initiatives are partnering with Giant Voices, which is a marketing firm out of Duluth, using some of the funds that we received through that DEED grant earlier this year on a child care provider outreach campaign. So encouraging people to enter the field of child care. So excited that that is moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Storlie, for the update there. The Community Health Board, we met yesterday in Duluth, and let's see, what can I share from that? We had kind of reports from the different counties about their community health assessments, and I pulled those up just to share. Whoops, I did pull them up and then scrolled down. Just for comparison, you know, Cook County, we have our 6 items of mental health, healthy foods, and this is abbreviated, it's not the literal. Affordable quality childcare, affordable housing, physical health services, and transportation options. So that's for Cook County, that's us. Lake County has Be Well Mentally, Move More, Address Suicide. Carleton County has mental health and well-being, obesity, substance use. St. Louis County has mental health / well-being, sexually transmitted infections, and substance use. So I think it's important for us to have the perspective of what other priorities are going on in the region and how they overlap with ours and how they might differ, and how we might be able to help each other with that. Across all of them, we have mental health, so that's worth noting. And then 2 of them have substance use, and then yeah, I guess we don't need to go into more detail there, but I thought that was really interesting to get those perspectives. Also, we had a presentation regarding tobacco use and particularly vaping again, and just kind of update on what's going on there. Some of the statistics that were shared is a correlation between adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and tobacco use. And I don't know that it was a direct linear relationship, but and I don't know if you gleaned something different, Allison, but it seemed like with every ACE present in a child's life, there was a 10% increase of tobacco use later on. So if a child has 0 ACEs, say they have a 10% chance of using tobacco, and then they have 1 ACE, they'd have a 20% chance. So you'd say it's double that of none, and so it goes on from there. Just if you have 4 ACEs, then it was 40% or whatever. So pretty interesting. They also had a graph showing tobacco use in school-aged kids over time, and there was a huge spike. The vape use really started in 2016, and that's when Juul was first kind of hitting the markets bigger, and then huge spike after that, but then has gone down again, which they were kind of asking, like, well, what do you think these correlations are about? And the pandemic and stress was certainly a factor of that, and just not having social interactions or of the same kind, or else supervision of the same kind and all that, but then also T21 and how that really impacted the availability, and they're finding that raising the age to 21 had a pretty significant impact in 8th and 9th graders especially, not having access to that as easily, so. But it's still an issue, still a problem, still nothing to blow off, but before vaping became kind of mainstream market, the feeling is we had a pretty good handle on tobacco use in kids. It still existed, but it wasn't nearly as prevalent, and so it's extremely frustrating for everybody that that this impact happened and was allowed to happen. And of course, we're getting settlements through that to try to combat that with more education again. And just some of the misconceptions out there about vaping and just the chemicals in there, and always learning more about it. So I know this board in the past has had presentations, and Cook County is one of the communities that passed a T21 ordinance. So preaching to the choir here, but just wanted to give that update. I don't think there's anything else I want to report from that, unless something stood out in your mind, Allison. But
the things that stand out to me in that meeting are the reports from the other county public health leaders, and some of the things that I thought were really interesting in terms of initiatives that they were reporting the board on was a initiative in Carleton County to develop a shelter in a box as a part of the public health core responsibility to provide emergency shelter, acknowledging that they don't have staffing capacity necessarily to set up a full-blown shelter in maybe an extended power outage or a severe weather event, but how can we empower individuals with the tools to help them shelter in place in their homes? What are the things? And I didn't get a sense of what those items were, but I'm interested in learning more about that. Likewise, the public health supervisor in Lake County talked about some of their outreach initiatives, doing mini health fairs at churches and community events, and aligning that with their priority health improvement areas around suicide prevention and safety. So allowing access to gun locks, promoting 988, some outreach initiatives that are in alignment with their suicide prevention goals.
yeah, there was one other thing that stood out, and now I just lost it. It'll come back to me. Don't worry. Moving on to the local mental health advisory council. Rana.
Okay, we met last Tuesday, and one of the things we talked about was imagery and discussion of not stigmatizing people with problems. And there were a lot of good examples about, like, photos that might be in the paper of how to represent, for example, a person being arrested, a person having problems with drugs, going to court, things like that, and to focus on really how we can help people. I think Grace addressed a lot of that we're looking at it as these people need help, not these are bad people, because that stigma just makes their recovery that much harder. And they're embarrassed, they don't want to see friends, or, whatever. So I think everybody has, and this is geared, of course, toward newspapers or publicity, that there are different ways of showing some of these events. And we could improve a lot on how we do that with really caring about a person who has a problem. They're not a bad person, they may have a bad problem, but I thought that was really important.
Showing that things can be harmful, but not demonizing the...
Right, it's not necessarily the person's fault, like, say a child who grows up with ACEs then is getting into drug abuse or something, they didn't really want that to happen in their life, it just kind of fed that way, and they need somebody to help them get out of it. And just the example of showing like a police car versus showing someone in handcuffs, of focusing on where the help is coming from rather than stigmatizing the people involved. So, and that was I think that was a main takeaway for me from that meeting, so I don't know if there's anything else we talked about.
Thank you. Restorative Justice, Commissioner Hawkins.
I have a meeting tomorrow. There is some training going on. I was just looking for my email, and I can't, of course, can't find it because so I can't give you the exact. But if you're interested in restorative justice, I know there's training out there.
Circle training.
Circle training. That's it. And I can't find my email now because I didn't write it down. But anyway, encourage you to participate, and if you are interested in that.
Friday and Saturday.
Yes. Thank you.
Saturday, okay.
Thank you. Council on Aging, Commissioner White.
Well, that is the most energizing, dynamic group that I get to hang out with. And they are very diligent, and they themselves are energized to keep that agency or that organization strong. And as I had said, I don't know where I said it, but anyway, they now are offering chair yoga down there, not they as the organization, but, you know, that it is being offered through them, and bone builders. So it becomes more of a location for the TAB community to try to stay limber. So just nothing but good things coming out of that joint.
Emergency Preparedness Committee, Commissioner Sullivan.
Well, we did not meet this month. We meet every other month, and Allison already mentioned the fact that we do have a tabletop related to winter storms that'll be coming up.
And Healthcare Planning Committee, Commissioner Storlie.
I'll just do a few highlights here, and kudos to Julie for the Alzheimer walk, your very first one. Yeah, and so I think that's encouraging that folks get out there and help those who have that situation in their life with their families, and hopefully maybe another one will happen in a year or so. It looks like you need some volunteers to help with that. Kimber reported that Senator Hochschild will be here next Thursday, and she will be meeting with him. He's going to be busy because we're going to have him all over the area, but she'll be meeting with him and talking about North Shore Hospital. The nursing home in Cloquet will be closing at the end of ’23, and that will make an impact, I think, all over as things start waving out, and more to be looked at as far as that happens. And Kate Serba reported that the pharmacy set records in August and September for prescription refills. So they're widely used, evidently. That's my report from that. So, Mr. Chair, I'll just move right into NACO.
Thank you.
We'll be meeting next Wednesday, but in preparation for that, we were given 10 different areas to consider voting on, and I won't give you all the 10, but I'll give you the 3 that I felt will impact my area, understanding that NACO comes from all of the states. So, of course, I'm always looking at rural areas. And the first one would be to ensure equitable health care access to serving the rural communities. Another one is federal funding to protect the integrity of key health safety net programs. And the last one I chose is to provide targeted funding at administration to help counties combat substance abuse, which we know covers everything here. Opioids, synthetics, methamphetamines, and all of that. So we will be discussing that then next Wednesday to see where everybody's coming from. And just one other point. I guess I'd like to throw the word communication out in 2 areas. Now, today at the Lutzen Town Hall, we're going to have our first meeting with the age-friendly community. And I don't know how that was presented to the West End? Was it posters? Was it, I don't know how many people are going to come. So I'll find out at 4 o'clock. Yeah.
Can I address that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I will say, one of the things that we kind of decided to push this quickly is we were a little concerned about suddenly darkness is coming upon us. And we really wanted to try to get these going as much as possible before the daylight savings and try to do that. So that is why was probably a primary reason why we really tried to get these going. But we did posters and media blasts and social media, and really just trying to get it out to people that we have worked with to say, please help us spread the word. But yeah, if you have other ideas tonight, this will be our first one, so we'll see how quickly that.
I'll look forward to that, that's for sure. And as far as communication goes, the vax shots, the flu and the COVID are coming to the West End. I found out through the grapevine, and so contacted the clinic, and they said it was on their website. Now, we have to understand that people don't go to the clinic website every day, but they do go to Boreal, and they listen to WTIP. I looked on Boreal this morning. It was not on there. So publicly, I will announce the vaccine for COVID and flu will be at the Arrowhead Electric this coming Friday from 8:30 to 10, and then at Birch Grove from 2 to 4. So, folks, I'm going to send a blast out via our garden club, because we have many members, and just get the word out there, because I want this to be successful. And there's no pre-registration. You show up at the door, and they will give you whatever you want there with the 2 different choices. So that's my bandstand for now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say, can I say, that was a big difference in last year's promotional activities, which I think was done by Public Health, because I didn't even know, I didn't hear anything about it, and then all of a sudden, I think it was Tuesday, it's like, well, there's going to be a walk-in at the clinic, so like within that hour we go, and it was fine, but it was just like, how did I miss this? Because I think I look at a lot of things, but somehow it did not, and it was on the clinic website, but again, it's not a daily thing for me to report, so.
We'll have to make some more inroads with the clinic communications and just coordination there.
Yeah.
And knowing far enough ahead, I go to the community lunch on Wednesdays, so, that's my chance to bring folks up to speed, and a lot of them don't have computers.
Right.
So, it's just like voice, or the phone, or listening to and going on, for those who have a computer, Boreal. So if we all work together, we can get all this accomplished, I think.
Thank you. Let's see, that moves us on to the Northeast Office of Job Training. Commissioner Hawkins.
Well, I want to thank Commissioner Storlie. She was able to attend the last meeting when I was not able to last month. So I don't know if you have any, I did talk to her about it. Doesn't sound like there's much to report, but do you want to say anything then?
It's an interesting group. At the end of it, I wasn't sure our role in it, but it sounded like they definitely want us. And so as we progress to understand, we don't help them with jobs. We don't do anything like that other than to know maybe what's available. I mean, they do a lot of work on the Iron Range. And so I think they want our presence, and we'll do what we could do with the going to the meetings.
I think that's probably exactly what Commissioner Hawkins has experienced, and very similar to what I experienced. And kind of my take on it, or strategy, I guess, was the presence that we have there and the updates that we can provide of what's going on in our community as far as workforce and our challenges, and then kind of listening in on what their issues are and how sometimes they're very similar, sometimes they're very different perspectives. So I learned a lot. I felt like I provided a lot, but I don't know how much of it was accepted. But yeah, so that goes. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, it's. I feel like it's an important regional organization. I'm not sure logistically, concretely, what our role is there. But I like to support our region. So that was my justification. I don't know if you all come to different conclusions. But-
And actually, in 2 weeks, they are meeting, for the first time, the executive, or local elected officials board is meeting with the advisory board, which I'm kind of looking forward to
Yep.
get that dynamic and figure out more
What's
of
going- yeah.
how we're all supposed to be working together.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We had a virtual one, but never an in-person one.
This
so,
one is going to
yeah,
be in person. so.
That'll be excellent. Be very curious to hear about that. And that'll be in Virginia, probably. or-
No, that one's going to be in Carlton.
No, okay. All right, North Shore Collaborative, we've got our meeting scheduled here, but not yet anything to report. And then the Public Health and Human Services Advisory Council, and Chair Campanero is not here. We have Commissioner Sullivan as ex officio, and Julie Wilson as the sub for Pat. So I don't know
Wanna
between
go
the
ahead?
two of you who.
Yeah, I would just say we haven't met
Oh.
recently, so we'll have our next meeting in November 7th.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't really have anything to report.
No, I should have known that because we have the local mental health advisory council report, so. Thank you. And thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
All right, last one. Yes, Commissioner Hawkins? did you
Yes, I
yeah,
have
yes,
something.
please, yes.
I didn't want to forget. Yesterday, I attended a webinar on cannabis from the Regional Prevention Coordinators. I think it was in our newsletter. Anyway, I signed up. It was excellent. I learned so much. So I would encourage everybody else, if you have the opportunity, there's another one next month. I missed the first one, but I was able to attend yesterday. And I really think it opened my eyes to things that I thought I knew and I didn't. So I encourage you to check that out. A lot of good information.
Any highlight you would like to share, or
The toxicity of
the smoke, or the,
the products and
oh,
no regulations
Oh.
and thinking of us having a store and wow. And the impacts that is having, this one was more focused on women, women's health. And I don't know, it's kind of scary.
there's a lot of education that needs to
Yeah,
happen.
so,
One of the fears I'm hearing about is, well, of course, there's two sides, but the normalization of it, and it, if it's, to some extent, if it's normalized, then people are like, oh, well, it's not bad then, right? But there still are significant harms. What I said, there's two sides, is because that normalization also from the social justice side of things has often been kind of a viewpoint. So it's interesting. But yeah, I feel very strongly about needing more education about cannabis and use and abuse and the impacts it has on so many different aspects of a person's health, whether that's mental health or lung health or you name it, or just addiction and the pathways thereof in the brain. I still I think about that as far as if there was to be a municipal dispensary and how that might further normalize the substance, and the risk there. But then I also think about the opportunity that provides for the education, as I said before, and also just like, well, if it's not a municipal and our community is required to allow for at least one license, then it's going to be another shop. So then we'll have probably less influence on that. But yeah, what a dynamic situation. And Mr. York?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The point that Commissioner Hawkins made about the lack of or spottiness of regulation is really concerning. This has been an issue ever since hemp-based THC was allowed for sale. And that's something that I think we all need to be really concerned about. There is certainly an education piece to it, but it's also a regulatory system that ensures that whatever products are being sold are as safe as they can be. And I don't think that exists currently.
And I think, it seems like what I've read is they're trying to recognize that and start to address it, but it also sounds like there's significant pushback from the hemp industry already. And it's a young-ish industry in Minnesota, so it's just really, really interesting to try to understand that. But thank you for that. Yeah, Commissioner White?
So have there been conversations with, like, say, Colorado?
Yes.
And they have, what sort of regulations do they have, and what sort of oversight do they have on the products that are being sold in their state? I mean, in Denver, and the money from cannabis sales is for education. And they have one heck of an educational system in Colorado these days because of almost unlimited funds. But then, there are other issues, but when you worry about making it be normalized, let's talk about alcohol. Let's talk about tobacco. You know, pick your poison, as it were. And so it's education, and even as much as education as you want to get out there, people still smoke cigarettes. So, you know, I mean, you do what we can, but the talk about the county being responsible for a cannabis dispensary, we struggle to get employees to fund the services we provide for our community. We somehow have been pretty unsuccessful, even with the information we have, to do any sort of deferred maintenance on the 25 buildings that we have out there, and then another one coming. So then we would add to that list. And then, should government be in competition with private businesses? Should we be in competition with them? And I don't think government should be overriding, if it's free enterprise, as it were. And it's just like when we have the YMCA, which is subsidized by the county, how many at that point in time healthcare providers did we not have anymore? Or what about the weightlifting? We had 2 weightlifting or fitness businesses that were done once the YMCA came in, because they couldn't compete. So I do not believe that government should be competing with private enterprise. So,
There you have it, folks.
and I'm,
Sticking to it.
well, and I'll argue that too, so.
Well, I'm not sure that I would, you bring up a number of good points. I'm not sure I would say that we're subsidizing, the county is subsidizing the Y. There's not an exchange of money there. We do provide the building, it's a partnership, and so to some extent, they also subsidize our community with the services they provide.
We could have that argument.
Yeah.
We could really have a long argument.
Well,
on
and
that.
no doubt we will, as we're looking through the agreements. And it'll be really helpful to have that perspective, to try to look at things from all angles there. A lot of, you brought up kind of the deferred maintenance side of things, and a lot of that history has to do with a lack of resources, or a lack of willingness of the board to provide resources to do the work. It's been a lot of penny pinching and trying to cut, instead of taking care of what needs to be taken care of, and then that catches up. So I don't know that we can lean on that to say that county government can't do things successfully.
But we've had the information now, what needs to be done.
Yes,
From very competent consultants.
yes.
Very detailed report with a timeline, when things should be worked on, like roofs, in like 2023.
Okay.
We're now in October. Building season is, so where has any movement happened? We've known this. We don't need, there's no value and saying, well, those people didn't do it in the past. We're here now.
Yes.
We have the information that we need. We have the will to do this.
Yep.
And we have done nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing for fixing our buildings, unless Brian has been busy through the summer, or his crew has.
They have.
And now this roof is leaking. He has.
Oh,
So
both.
what buildings have been worked on?
You know, I'm not.
Can we have a report from Brian, Administrator Yorkie?
We
Or from his
certainly
department.
can. I'm not sure what this has to do with Health and Human Services,
Well,
but
It
it's
has to
the
do
good
with-
of the order.
It has to do with whether or not we should undertake investing in another enterprise building, since we haven't caught up with what we've got at this point in time. And we also have such a labor shortage
Well, I don't
all
think-
the time.
so if I could just
Before you
respond.
respond, please, I just don't think it's fair to both be obstructionist and point fingers.
I'm not pointing fingers, but for the fact, I don't understand why we haven't made any effort to go forward now.
Well, we certainly are. The board is voted twice now, 4-1, to go on with the capital improvement plan and to try to move forward. But
And-
at every step, that previous boards and this board, there has been significant pushback, like, is this really necessary? Is this really necessary? And I feel like there's been sufficient evidence with each step to show that it is, but it's not, there's just a lack of trust. And so, and some, some of that is inherent, some of that is deserved. But I think as we make progress, it will develop and just come to fruition. So I appreciate the well-deserved recognition of deficiencies, but I don't appreciate, I guess, just that blaming and pointing. I think it's much more productive to try to work together to get this stuff done.
Right, so that's why we need to get, we need to get the maintenance, the PERT maintenance done, and we need to fix buildings
Absolutely.
now. And that hasn't, yesterday.
Yeah, and the building committee does get updates from Brian, and just to see the goings-ons, but I'd say it's a resource issue. But sorry, Mr. Yorkie, you wanted to
No,
respond.
I just wanted to say we are working, Brady and I have been talking with Bruce Kimmel at Ellers about putting together a bonding proposal. That's really a key step in starting to fund these initial improvements. And that's something that we are still working with Bruce to put together to bring to the board. And we're going to have public hearings about that to get the public to provide input on the funding strategy before we can move forward with those projects.
And just one little question, we have, is it called a contingency fund or a rainy day fund, or we have a healthy fund balance, correct?
We have a healthy fund balance,
Yes.
correct?
Could we not use some of that to fix the dire roof situations without waiting for bonding? I mean, we can repay it, but is that not what that fund balance is for? Like an emergency, like leaking roofs?
I would say that, yes, we could, we can. We, as the board, can use that fund however we deem necessary. But I'd ask you, are you sure the use of that fund is in the organization's best long-term interest for our capital improvement plan for immediate needs? Or should we use that to do the whole comprehensive thing? And should we do this, should we continue to just put out fires, or should we try to have, develop our fire response plan and to have
Well,
that
right, but the house is on
prevention?
fire.
Sure.
The house is on fire, the
I wouldn't go
court,
that far, but
milled, we have somebody who can't use his office because of mildew. It's kind of like a little smoldering fire, if nothing else.
okay.
So it's a concern, because this is the community's house. The courtyard the courthouse belongs to the Cook County people.
Yep.
And we're not taking care of it.
I think we're
That,
making great
that's
strides.
not accurate. We are taking care of it. We've hired a consultant to come in to assess the mold situation and to make repairs. And we're actually, Brian's been working with ServPro to try to get somebody up here. They are short-staffed. It's the same old story. It's not like we're sitting on our hands, not responding to the problem.
I feel like Brian has done everything he can, and that guy is so talented, so experienced, so skilled. And I've seen, I think, leaps and bounds improvement with James's leadership and willingness to address issues as soon as they come up, rather than putting them off. And there's situations where there can be tough calls and you have to balance priorities, but I truly believe and will shout from the mountaintops of the progress that's happening. It's just, with government, it's certainly not fast, but we will get it done, and we're going to do it well. We're not going to do the economy job. We're going to do a quality job.
Right. And if the whole courthouse becomes really bad, we could make it into a parking ramp, because we need parking in this county, or we could do high-end short-term rental. We could do a lot of good things here. I'm speaking facetiously, of course. I'm not being...
Less than helpful, but I appreciate humor.
So,
Thank you. Any other items for the good of the order here? Then we're adjourned. Bada bang.
I got a note from Andrea, and I'll be there at 4 o'clock.
Oh, good.
For
that
a while.
was a
I
good
have to
thing, the
return at
Canada
7.